Hello everybody. It's been a little while since my last game dev tutorial, but this summer the college I'm working at has a summer camp for high schoolers coming in, and as always, when high schoolers are coming to college for some reason, I get recruited to show them game dev stuff. It's a good way to catch teenagers' attention, apparently. So I was getting things prepared. I decided to go with the Godot 4 engine. I just finally got around to giving that a try. I'm really happy with Godot 4. And there's a nice, easy learning curve since the high schoolers that will be coming to a college campus to do computer stuff have probably seen Python before. Makes the learning curve for the scripting easy so we can hopefully be able to get into shaders in that week we have there. So I wanted to give it a quick a try, kind of a dry run on my thing, and thought I'd go ahead and record it and judge the videos, and I will probably put these up on YouTube. So gonna make a quick intro to game dev with using Blender 3.5 and Godot 4.0, even though 4.1 was just released a couple days before 4.1 dev was released a couple days before I started recording this video, but I'm going to use 4.0, so we'll look at that. So Blender 3.5 and Godot 4.0 for a quick introduction to game dev here. So let's get started. Okay, like I was saying, I went with Godot 4.0 or zero point 0.2, looks like what I have on here. Um, it's a fully functional game engine, but not as fully functional as Unity, which is then a lot less has a lot less functionality than Unreal. I think anybody watching the game dev video is probably aware of that. Uh, so with less functionality, it's easier to get started in. There's a lot less to do, and when we look at shaders here in a couple of videos, uh, there's less going on in the shaders and materials, so it's easier to not get lost in Godot and pick up that base knowledge than take to Unity and then Unreal and kind of step up. Which is another thing I found over the years with game dev is uh, to really learn it, you want to learn a couple engines. So oftentimes it's a good idea to have a small game or something, make the same game in like three different engines. So make the game in Godot and then come back and make it in Unity and come back and make the same game in Unreal. And that's a great way to learn all the different engines. And then you can choose the one that is best for the particular project. Because, yeah, variety is good and just know the field better overall. But Godot is oriented towards Linux free open source software. So when you download it, if you weren't aware of this already, you don't really get an installer like you might be used to on Windows or Mac system. It's more like Linux where you just download the files and they run directly. This one right here, that looked like the right one, so I started that and it was. I don't think I've gotten around to check what's on the other file in here, but the Godot 4.0.2 is what we'll be using for these videos. So let's go ahead and jump into that. All right, when you first start Godot, you'll see something like this. There might be some messages. Ignore the messages for now and look for the new project button. It looks a little bit different the very first time, but you'll see the new project button after you ignore all the messages. Hit a new project, and we need to give it a name and a place to keep it. So I'm going to call this video, and I guess I'll just put it in my Scratch there in the document somewhere. So add the folder, click browse to look for it. Uh, there's a couple different renders we could choose. You can click there and read through the options. Forward plus is probably the one you want to go with, the advanced 3D graphics. Oh yeah, I think I forgot to say, this is going to be a 3D game tutorial. Can scale to large complex scenes. So those two things right there are kind of what first pop in my mind when with the words game dev. I know all the other stuff like little puzzle games or 2D platformers and uh, uh, that stuff all works in there eventually, but 3D graphics on large complex scenes are the first thing that pop in my mind when somebody says uh, game dev. And choose a version control metadata. And just go with Git. That might show up some in the videos because this summer I'm also teaching a special topics on Git source control management. uh, and GitHub project management through GitHub, but mostly it's the courses specifically on Git. So there might be some of that work in the video as well. But once you get those settings set up, go ahead and create it. And this will start a new project. And I'm going to jump over to Blender and do some modeling first. But I wanted to start the project because, well, we click that option to create the folder where the project's kept. And at least in my mind, it makes sense to keep the original images in there with the project. So let's jump over to Blender now, and then we'll come back to Godot in just a moment. Or actually, before we jump into Blender, I want to set up some folders. A little bit of organization goes a long way. So let's set up some folders to use in our project. And I have to pause the video because for some reason my computer keeps messing up the video whenever I try to switch between windows on the taskbar. So back over here in File Explorer, and here's the video that was set up. You can see it came up with a couple things, some Godot information, a couple things that will be useful for Git SCM, source control management, and which is probably GitHub. I guess there are alternatives. You could use GitLab if you wanted to or something, but for our source control management, a couple files there, and this. So we need to set up some folders because a little bit of organization goes a long way, and in just about any game, we're going to end up with some things. So there's a few that I know I'm going to want. So I'm going to create a new folder for the assets. And this is the raw assets that get imported into the game, but not the source images. For the source images, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'll just call it source. Sounds like a good name for it. I guess I should have gone with SRC, the normal. But this isn't going to be part of the project. I don't want all of the metadata about Godot worrying about those source images because those are going to be imported into assets. And then once they're imported, they'll be turned into Godot objects. So don't really want to worry about this with all of our source control stuff. So I'm going to go in here and make a new file with a specific name. For some reason on Windows 11, there's not an option to just create a file. It's really weird, so I'm going to go in PowerShell and do it. So if I go in PowerShell, here at this location, make a new item, and it needs to be called .gdignore. So this is telling the Godot engine to ignore this folder. It'll default to a file, but I'm going to add item type file. So it is one of those with no name and just an extension, but just creating the file is enough that the Godot engine knows to ignore this folder now. And for some reason on Windows 10, they got rid of the blank file. So you can't create a file without an extension from the File Explorer. I don't know why they did that, but now that we got that folder, that's where our images and other source material will go. Then they'll get imported into assets, and after they're assets, they'll be turned into objects, which Godot uses trees. We'll talk about this more later. A collection of nodes. So everything's a node. Nodes go into parent-child relationships as a tree structure, and then a collection of nodes is called a scene, and then a scene can be used as a node in another scene. So layers and layers and layers of nodes. We will get to that soon, but we'll turn them into objects, and they're all called scenes, but that terminology kind of confuses me because I think of that as levels. So I'm going to make another folder specifically for the levels where we tie all of those objects together. So I'm going to skip using the general Godot terminology. I will try to mention it, but I'm going to try to go with more of a all-around one. The terminology that's not specific to the engine, so that the concepts we talk about in this video series will apply if you start a project in Unity or start a project in Unreal. And a general game development thing, we're just using the Godot engine for the example. We're also going to need some materials to make those objects look good because uh, Godot has a scripting language based on Python, so it's very quick and easy to get into, uh, which means that in a fairly short uh, YouTube playlist like this video is going to be part of, we will have time to jump into shaders and not just click a color for the material. Actually, uh, we will be coding the shaders and turning that code into a material that can be reused on different objects. So we'll be able to make that look good. And then fog and Godot 4 has a really awesome new sky feature, uh, programmable sky shaders specifically. We will see that in an upcoming video. So that gets us some folders. The project's ready to start. First thing we need though is some images. And we'll do that in Blender, but it looks like the video's up to 11 minutes, so that's probably a good length of time for the first video. I'll go ahead and start Blender. Well, it's in the taskbar, so again, I have to pause the video to do that. And just like all game engines, Godot does have the functionality to make uh, make all the stuff, make all the 3D models there and add materials, but Blender has better functionality for making the materials. And in the newest version of Godot, we can completely bring in the Blender shaders, the really high quality ones. But I'm going to skip that. I'm going to do what I would do in Unity and Unreal, which is make the model in Blender the mesh, and then I will use the materials and shaders from the game engine, and Blender has better tools to put the mesh together. Though we will see the landscape painter in one of the videos coming up soon. At least that's the plan. I want to try to run through everything I have planned for this high school summer camp. But it looks like that's enough time for the first introduction video here. Everything's set up. We're ready to start creating our models, and I will do that in the next video. See y'all then.